Good evening. I'm glad you're here, and it's my privilege to welcome you to Pacific Lutheran University and to the 5th annual Jolita Highland Benson Lecture. You belong here. If you're serious about education, if you see it as a tool to help people engage in thoughtful inquiry, to lead lives of service leadership, and to care for each other, for communities, and for the earth, this is home. So welcome. Whether you're a student, a faculty member, an administrator, whether you are a community member, a PLU supporter, whether you work for a school district, in ESD, or as a consultant, welcome. You belong here, so make yourself at home. Sit back and enjoy the evening. I'd like to introduce to you Lenny Reisberg, who holds the Jolita Hanson Benson Chair of Elementary Education.
Well, greetings, and I'd like to also welcome you to PLU and the 5th annual Jolita Highland Benson Education Lecture. Frank introduced me, so I don't need to tell you. My name is Lenny Reisberg, and for my students, don't worry, I am not the speaker tonight, so don't. And if you have questions about your SPED 424 assignments, Greg Williams is sitting over there. He'll be happy to answer your questions immediately following the lecture. I've been asked to make one quick announcement. In the Harstead lot, there's a white Ford F-150 that's parked oddly, and campus safety is concerned. And so if it belongs to anybody, you might think that it's a good idea to repark. For the past 5 years, I've had the honor of holding the Jolita Highland Benson Endowed Chair in Elementary Education, and tonight it will be my privilege to introduce our speaker, Milton Chen. Before I call our speaker to the podium, I want to tell you a little bit about today's events. It's been a really exciting day for us at PLU, and this is the culmination of that day. About 6 or 7 years ago, I started working with Puget Sound Educational Service District to create a partnership. As most of you know, I teach the technology classes, and it's a tough deal to teach them and keep up with the way technology changes as quickly as it does. So we started a collaboration with Puget Sound ESD. And today, we hosted over 200 teachers from 14 different school districts to talk about implementing blended learning in their classrooms. This was part of this collaboration ongoing, and it's been just an exciting day. And to finish it off now with a wonderful lecture from Milton Chen is just a terrific end to a great day. Now, as I noted, today's conference and tonight's, or as I will note, today's conference and tonight's lecture have been supported by the Benson Family Foundation. And I'd like to offer a word of thanks and recognition to two individuals, to Jolita and Dale Benson, whose generosity and commitment both to K-12 education and to Pacific Lutheran University made these events possible and made my endowed chair possible. Jolita Highland Benson worked as a classroom teacher. She was recognized for her commitment and her concern for students. And through the ensuing years, Jolita never lost her interest in education. And one example of her dedication to our students is the Benson support for this endowed chair and for tonight's lecture. The two individuals, Jolita and her husband Dale Benson, truly embody commitment to service that is such an important part of PLU's mission. The Bensons are seated here in the front, and I'm going to ask them to stand, and we should express our gratitude for their generosity. I also want to thank a few other people who have helped make tonight's lecture possible. Diana Duclos, an administrative assistant in the Department of Education, and Frank Klein, Dean of the School of Education, who have helped me make tonight possible. Now, for tonight's lecture. For the past 30 years, our educational system in the United States has come under increasing criticism for yielding what has at best been characterized as mediocre results. Now, if you go into a bookstore in Tacoma, assuming you could find a bookstore in Tacoma anymore, you could check into the current books on education, and they seem to fall into two categories. One category are the books that say our educational system is failing, and the way we need to address that is to increase our reliance on testing and standards. The other set of books are ones that talk about, well, the reform movement in education has been hijacked by people who want to privatize our public and common good, our public education system. Milton Chen's book, Education Nation, stands apart from those. Milton's book focuses on solutions to make our educational system more effective for our kids, for students in the 21st century. Milton has a storied career. How many of you grew up learning to read or helped to learn how to read by watching Sesame Street or Electric Company? You can raise your hands. Yeah, most of you. And how many of you had a Bert and Ernie doll? And how many of you guys out there had a crush on Maria? No, never mind. That's not part of it. So Dr. Chen is Senior Fellow and Executive Director Emeritus of the George Lucas Educational Foundation. He served as Executive Director of the George Lucas Foundation for 12 years, and prior to joining the foundation in 1998, he served as the founding director of KQED Center for Education, public broadcasting system in San Francisco. In the 1970s, he was director of research at Sesame Street Workshop in New York and helped develop Sesame Street. So you can say thank you. If Sesame Street helped you learn to read, here's a guy who helped you learn to read. You never met him before. The Electric Company, 321 Contact are also programs that he developed. He's been an assistant professor at Harvard Graduate School of Education, and during 2007 and 8 was one of 35 Fulbright New Century Scholars conducting research on access and diversity issues in higher education and in K-12. He chairs the advisory council for the Fred Rogers Center for Early Learning. Some of you probably remember Fred Rogers as well. And the children's media at St. Vincent College in Pennsylvania. He's a trustee of the Golden Gate National Parks Conservancy, a nonprofit dedicated to environmental conservation, education, and stewardship. Dr. Chen's work has been honored by the Elmo Award for Sesame Workshop, the Fred Rogers Award from the Corporation of Public Broadcasting, and the Congressional Black Caucus. So it is with pleasure that I call to the podium tonight's speaker, Dr. Milton Chen.
Thank you so much, Lenny. And I've been saying throughout the day, it's a special pleasure to be here at Pacific Lutheran. I always enjoy coming to university campuses, seeing the students here. You are the future of this world of education that we're helping to create together. It's a really exciting time for the work. In some ways, I think it's the best time in education because we've now provided the world of knowledge at our fingertips, and that's taken a tremendous amount of work by many, many people, but now's the time when everything we've said before about equity in education, about having all students learn to a much higher level, about student engagement, about encouraging passion and curiosity for learning, now's the time when we have the tools to do that. So it's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you to Pacific Lutheran for hosting me. Thank you, President Kreis and Mrs. Kreis, and especially to Mr. and Mrs. Benson for sponsoring this lecture series. It's a great privilege and a great honor, so thank you very much. I had a clicker. I'm titling my talk, 6 Leading Edges of Innovation. My entire career has been in educational innovation, going back 40 years, is that possible? My first summer job, my first job out of college was at Sesame Workshop. So ever since then, once you're in the studio with the Muppets and you're seeing this magic happen, and you're seeing a segment, a piece of music with the Muppets, whether it's, Kermit singing "It Ain't Easy Being Green," about, in some ways, an early version of bullying, really, talking about it's not easy to be a frog, a green frog. And to see that and to know that 6 million kids would see that segment 2 months later. So I got bitten by this bug very young. I studied with a Harvard professor who mentored me in 1970. And ever since then, I've known that there are new ways of teaching, there are new ways of learning, that kids as young as 3, 4, and 5-year-old preschoolers could learn content that, believe me, in 1969, when Sesame Street hit the airwaves, a lot of educators before that had said, this will never work. You cannot use television to teach. Have you seen television? Have you seen what's on? It's, puppet shows and animations and cartoons and cowboy westerns and a lot of stereotypes. That'll never work. But we said, we're going to do something very, very different with television than what you've known before. In some ways, this whole innovation paradigm goes back to people like Henry Ford. Henry Ford once said, if I asked people if they would like the automobile, they had never seen this before. If I asked them, how would you improve transportation, they would have said, well, what I'd like is a faster horse. Could I have that, Mr. Ford? No, the automobile was something very different. Sesame Street was something very different. And if you fast forward now to 45 years later, Sesame Street will be 45 years old this fall when you see that new season. We're in a whole new age of learning, a whole new horizon, a very exciting time. So this is just a slide to say that I've been at this a very long time because this was 1982. I know that you have some partnerships with China. You have students attending part of their university experience in China. You have visiting scholars. I'm pleased that one of your visiting scholars is here tonight from the People's Republic of China. This is one of the first early co-productions between China Central TV and Sesame Workshop. It was called Big Bird in China. There was a little girl. This little girl was cast out of a kindergarten in Beijing in 1982. And this was aired on NBC and then on China Central TV. I've had a very fortunate career. I'm very fortunate to have had the education I've had growing up in this country. Afterwards, perhaps, I'll tell you the longer version of my story and how my parents came here. But they were very fortunate to stay in this country, even though they were separated from their families and could not go back to their home for more than 30 years. They were immigrants here, but they did not plan to stay here. They wanted to go home and be with their families, but a little civil war broke out and things changed pretty dramatically in 1949. I've also been very fortunate to work for the George Lucas Educational Foundation, so I've had a little bit of experience with that galaxy long ago and far, far away. 2 educational innovators on different coasts, Joan Cooney in New York, George Lucas in the Bay Area, who knew and thought about how new media and technology could help children learn more quickly. I like what Seymour Papert, the former director of the MIT Media Lab, says about technology, was that this could be wheels for the mind. This could be a way of kids engaging with content in new ways that could accelerate their learning. So whenever people say we want to get kids to grade level, I say we can do more than that. We can do more than get kids. We can accelerate their learning and get them, as we heard today, students learning within 1 year, a year and a half's worth of content. We can accelerate their learning, and we'll show that in a new way that many people would not believe. This is our website, edutopia.org. You see here, on the homepage today, there's an article about the in-class flipped classroom, this idea of watching the lectures as homework on video and then coming to class and having discussion. So it changes the way in which time is used, very important in this new age of learning. I'm just curious for the students, how many of you have used videos as your homework? Yeah, so it's starting here as well. This is called the flipped classroom, and you're part of it. I think decades from now, maybe even as long as 50 years or 100 years from now, people will look back on this period. They will look back on this period and said something different started happening in the second decade of the 21st century. Our sense at Edutopia is that around 2010, this whole conversation about what is learning, what is education, where does it happen, when does it happen, how fast can people learn, that began to shift in around 2010 in our view. It's not coincidental that that's when the iPad came out. That's when broadband access to the internet started to really diffuse throughout homes and schools and universities. In tracking our web traffic at Edutopia, we began to see this increase in our web traffic around 2010. We began to see many more colleges of education, such as yours, requiring that students look at some of our segments online. We could track the URLs, and they were coming from a lot of .edus. Our web traffic back then was maybe 300,000 or 400,000 unique visitors per month. And now it is over 1 million unique visitors per month coming to our website. So we're in this age of increasing innovation and interest in this, and I'm just looking at the students. This is a great time to be studying education and thinking differently about it. We've got a lot of films on our website, and we work for a filmmaker, so that became the identity of edutopia.org. Many educators, in talking with Mr. Lucas, he would ask them, what should I be doing? I was not a good student. I had C's and D's. I was there in Modesto, California. I barely got through high school. I was not going to go to college. And through a couple of accidents, Mr. Lucas became one of the most distinguished graduates of our California community college system. He had a very serious car accident before high school graduation. The seatbelt that broke threw him from the car and saved his life. And he was there in the hospital, in the emergency room, and he's 18 years old, just a little younger than some of you, and saying, wow, I'm still alive. Maybe I should do something with this precious gift of life that I have. I've been given another day to live, and then another day. He began to think about himself, and he didn't have very good grades, but he said, maybe I should get some more education. So he went to Modesto Junior College. A couple years after that, his friend was going to USC. His friend said to George Lucas, you know, why don't you come to USC and finish your college? And you're interested in photography. Maybe they have a photography department, and you could study photography. Go and talk to your dad about that. So George Lucas Jr. goes to George Lucas Sr. and says, you know, my friend's going to USC. Maybe I should go and finish my college education. And George Lucas Sr. said, Junior, you're my only son. I want you to come back and run the family business here in Modesto, which is a stationery store, a stationery and office furniture store. But the father said, I think it's good that you finish your college education. If they happen to have a photography department, there's no way you're going to make a living as a photographer. So just, go to USC, and most people pick up the story there. There was no photography department. There was only this cinema school. And back then, in the 50s, early 60s, the USC Cinema School was nothing like it is today. It was a ticket to nowhere. If you wanted to work in Hollywood, work as a filmmaker, you did not go to a university and study it. You apprenticed in Hollywood. So most people pick up his story there that he was a very successful film student. George said, when I got there, it was the first time I ever saw a foreign film. I'd never seen a foreign film before. He said it was like recess all the time. It was the most fun. It was the first time that I was in an academic setting and I was getting really good grades. I was like one of the best students all of a sudden. He kind of transferred his interest from photography to film, and also his interest in using his hands. If you had asked him as a high school student, think about this, those of you who are teachers now or are going to be teachers, somewhere in your classrooms there's a student like George Lucas. That's a kind of an intimidating thought, that he had a series of teachers from kindergarten through 12th grade, that he was in their class. But no one ever said to him, you know, you're interested in photography. Why don't you do a photography exhibit related to a project we're going to do? You're interested in cars. Why don't you do a project on cars? These are interests that were never brought into the curriculum. So think about that as you go into teaching and you see students who don't seem very engaged. See if there's a way of connecting their interest to really engage them and get them to do projects that will really demonstrate what they know. On our website, therefore, we have a lot of films. We've made these films. We have a partnership with the Pearson Foundation to show schools from around the world, such as Singapore or Canada. Here's a story about financial literacy.